Arunagirimupetam Satchidanandamurtim Ramanayiti Prithivyam Vishrutam Jnanasuryam Gahana Hridaya Vidyam Leelaya Bodhayantam Satatam Aham Ameyam Sadgurum Samsmarami Apara Satchit Sukhavari Rashehe Yasyormi Matram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hridi Chintayami. My pranams. In our study of Devi Kalottaram, we saw the 74th verse last time, where Ishvara says, Samatva Bhavam is to be cultivated for a Jnana Abhyasi, somebody who is an aspirant in the path of knowledge. Samatva Bhavam is a very important thing. In the 75th verse, the same theme continues in a few more verses also. The 75th verse says, Abhilasho na kartabhyaha indriyarte kadachana atmaramo bhaved yogi nirmamo vigataspruhaha. Bhagavan's translation, Pori Vishayatil Urubodum Virupam Uravidad Ul Mamadai Oti Arivu Uramutru Ashai Bayam Atru Yendrum Anmavile Ramipan Masu Ila Yogi Madi, he says. He talks about a flawless yogi and the characteristics of such a yogi. A flawless yogi, somebody who doesn't have any blemish at all, is one who does not ever allow himself to be swayed by the sensory pleasures. He keeps away from them. And then he removes mamakara from his heart. Bhagavan has added one small word, an adjective to mamata, that is ul mamadai oti, where he is implying that this mamakaram is something that is because of the attachment that is inside oneself. Even though the objects of attachment are outside, the desires for them, the seeds of these desires, these attachments are inside. So he is indicating that by saying ul mamadai oti arivu uram utru ashai bayam matru endrum anmavile ramipan. He is all the time reveling in his own self. So he is a yogi. So he begins with this abhilasho na kartabhyaha. A yogi will never get involved, never get swayed by any sensory pleasure. Indriyarte kadachana. Indriya, in Tamil, Bhagavan uses the word pori. Pori vishayam. It is objects of pleasure. So he never gets involved in these things, and then he is very, very alert to see that they never get attached to him. And, this is something that all the sages and saints have said in all the religions about the danger of, the sensory pleasures. In fact, Ashtavakra Gita, the very beginning, the first shloka, Janaka asks Ashtavakra, how do I get mukti? And the reply to that, so the very beginning of Ashtavakra Gita, Ashtavakra says that mukti michasi chet tata, if you want mukti, ichasi chet tata vishayane vishavat tyaja. Treat the vishayas, all the sensory pleasures, as poison. Vishavat tyaja, give them up. So that is the danger, to the extent of saying that this is poison. In fact, in Viveka Chudamani, Adi Shankara goes a step further and he says, Doshe natibro vishayaha Krishna sarpa vishadapi. Krishna sarpam is a cobra. Krishna sarpa vishadapi. In fact, even greater than the poison of a cobra is this vishayaha. It is even more intense, he says. Vishayaha. Visham nihanti bhoktaram. In the case of a poison of a cobra, one has to, it has to get injected into the system. The poison has to get injected into the system. But in the case of these Vishayas, even that is not necessary. Even looking at them is enough. for you to get, trapped in that and then, get spoiled in the whole process. So that is the danger of this Vishaya Vasanas. So keep away from them is the importance given in this. And then he goes on to say that mamata, one has to completely give up mamata. Mamata is something that you claim something as your own. Mamakaram, these things are mine. As dangerous as ahankaram is, mamakaram is also equally dangerous. And this mamakaram develops, this mamata develops, as I said, when there are inner attachments, there are seeds of desires inside. And when they see an object outside, there is a desire to possess them. And he says, this is mine, this is mine. And he fights for it. And this mamata, if one can get rid of mamata, then even ahankaram can also be gotten rid of. Mamata, mamakaram is the one that the Bhakti Margam emphasizes. Don't consider anything as your own. Everything is his. Everything belongs to the Lord and nothing belongs to you. This is how the Bhakti Margam goes. Just as a Jnana Margi says that give up your ahankaram. These are all twins actually. One comes with the other. So in one place in talks, Bhagavan explains this beautifully. He says, I will just read out the talk. This is talk number 581. A question is about Tyaga. Bhagavan's answer. If the giving nature is developed, it becomes Tyaga. If anything is willingly given away, it is a delight to the giver and to the receiver. If the same is stolen, it is misery to both. Dana, dharma, nishkama karma, all are Tyagas only. And then he says, this is the important point. When mind is given up, it is chitta shuddhi, purified mind. When the mind, the mamakaram is given up, it is chitta shuddhi. When I is given up, it is jnana. When the nature to give away is developed, it results in jnana. And then he quoted a verse from Nammalvar to Devaraja Mudaliyar once. Nammalvar is a foremost of Vaishnavite saints. All his Tiruvayimozhi are very, very popular. And they form the very essence, the very basis of Vaishnavism. But he quotes from him, and then he later on says, Nammalvar is Namma Alvar, because he is an Advaitin, he says. Even though people call him as a Visitta Advaitin, actually he is an Advaitin. Look at this verse, he says, where mamata is mentioned. Yane ennai ariyekilade, Yane entranade, yentanade என்று இறந்தேன். Yane yentanade என்று இருந்தேன். Yane நீ, என் உடமையும் நீயே. Vane ஏத்தும் எம் வானவர் ஏரே. So the translation for this is, searching who this I was, soon I found you only standing as the heaven of bliss. You only, blessed Lord. Nothing is mine, only you. Everything is yours. Yen udamayum niye. Everything that I consider as myself, my mind, is actually yours. And then I realized when I had this feeling that everything's only yours, even my ahankaram also went. And then I found that everything is only you. So, not knowing who I was, I used to speak of I and mine. But I am you and mine is you, Lord, whom all the gods adore, says Nammalvar. So, mamakaram, if it is given up, that is a method of leading to giving up the ahankaram also. The Bhakti Margam follows that. Whereas the emphasis is on ahankaram, ahankara nashanam, in the case of Jnana Margam. So, finally, this Bhagavan adds a few more words in his translation. He says, this faultless yogi, after giving up his mamakaram, knowing that they're all because of the seeds of desire within, he fights with them and he gives them up. Arivu uram utru, he adds this. His wisdom his clarity becomes much more and it becomes strengthened. His mind becomes very, very strong. Ashai Bayam Atru. All these things are not there in the original. Ashai Bayam Atru. He leaves all his desires and Bayam, his fears also go with this. Endrum Anmavile Ramippan. And he revels only in the bliss of the self, and he does not have, he knows that he cannot derive any happiness from outside, any of the objects from outside. He is a perfect, faultless yogi. Mas ila yogi madi, he says. Bhagavan says this. So, this is the 75th verse. The same theme continues. The samatva bhavam and other things continues in the 76th verse also. The 76th verse is Samaninda prashamsascha sarvabhuta samastata samadrishtistu kartavya yatatmani tatapare. As you, whatever you wish for yourself is the same thing that you wish for others. Whatever you wish for others is the same thing that you wish for yourself. You do not see any difference between yourself and others. That's how he ends the thing. Bhagavan says, Samanahi Nindayil Satru Tudiyil. Tudi is Prashamsa Stuti. When somebody praises you or when somebody is insulting you, Ninda, in both you have a Samatva Bhavam. Samanahi Nindayil Satru Tudiyil Pin Samanahi Sarva Bhudattum. And you consider everything as the same thing. You do not distinguish between one and the other. Everything is the same for you. Samadrishti mannidave Vendumal Maramal Ennalum Tannuyir Pol Mannuyiril Tan. He sees himself in others and others in himself, says Bhagavan. Many of these things are, all these things are treated in a very similar way in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse. This is in the 5th chapter. The verse says, for the Samatva Bhavam, he says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini. This is a very popular verse. Brahmane Gavi Hastini. In no distinction between a Brahmin or a cow, this is an animal, or even a lower like type of an animal like an elephant. Shuni, even the lowest type of an animal, which is a dog. And also, Swapake, one who kills a dog and eats, the outcast, people who are in the very, very low level of development, all those people whom we call as, Harijans, all these people who are, not developed in, in mental maturity. In none of these things will make a difference to the jnani. Panditaha samadarshinaha, says Lord Krishna. The jnani, the pandita, he has an equal vision amongst all the people. Whether he is a well-read brahmana, or a cow, an elephant, or a dog, or somebody who is a dog eater, he does not make any distinction at all, he says. And that is what is the the import of this slokam. Sama Ninda Prashamsascha. He begins with the thing. He does not have any difference between somebody insulting him or somebody praising him. He does not make any distinction at all. For him, both of them are the same. And we saw in Bhagavan's life, every day the newspaper would be given to Bhagavan. Bhagavan would read the newspaper very diligently from the first page to the last page. And he neatly fold it and then keep it away. And others would then take the newspaper. And if there are, very frequently, there would be articles appearing in these newspapers about Bhagavan, about the glorious state that he was living in, and so on. So they will cut those articles and then they will paste it in an album. It seems one day a very scandalous article appeared in one of the newspapers. Of course, there were people who had taken Bhagavan to court, desiring the ashram's property and so on. So they were really influencing some people to write bad things about Bhagavan also. So one day a very bad article appeared, and a slanderous article, highly insulting. And Bhagavan went through the entire thing just as he would anything else. And then he went till the end of the newspaper, folded it again as usual, and then left it out. His devotees were hoping that Bhagavan would not have seen that article because they had seen it earlier, and they were hoping that Bhagavan had not seen it. After some time, in the afternoon, lunch was over in the afternoon, it seems Bhagavan asked for the newspaper once again. So they were, of course, they were taken aback. They gave him the newspaper, and then Bhagavan started cutting that article himself, preparing to paste it in the album. Oh, the devotees were dismayed, and then they said, Bhagavan, this is such a so full of lies this article is, and then so slanderous. Bhagavan, why are you cutting this? It seems Bhagavan said, I was waiting for you to do this. Normally, whenever there's an article appearing about me, you would cut it and then put it in the album. I was waiting for that. You did not do that, so I had to do it myself. But why, Bhagavan? This is very bad. This is Bhagavan said, people who write good things about me, it is their opinion. And we are respecting their opinions and we are pasting it in the album. And somebody does not like me, or he has a different way of looking at me. So he is writing something, and that's also his opinion. Should we not respect his opinion also? If you are going to respect this man's opinion, you should respect that man's opinion also. That is why we have to keep this. So that article was also pasted in the album. So Bhagavan's attitude was like, he never thought that something was against him or something was in his favor. Everything was the same. He really lived as an example for all these shlokas that appear about Samaninda Prasamsascha and so on. Samanahi Nindayil Satru Tudiyil, even there is a stotram, you would treat the same thing, same way. Sarva Bhuta Samastata, all the living beings are one for him. And there are millions of stories about Bhagavan's interaction with the animals and so on. I'll come to that a little later. I will cover something else. Bhagavan would not accept anything that is not given to others. Yathatmani tatha pare. Whatever he saw in others, whatever he wished for others, he wished the same thing for himself. Whatever others got, only he should get. He should not get anything extra. And there are so many incidents in the kitchen where Bhagavan would shout. Sometimes, very rarely will raise his voice and then say, Poda de, please don't put it in my leaf, he would say. One day it seems Shantamal, who was serving him, slipped in something more, some potato curry, very specially made on that day. So she wanted Bhagavan to eat more, and others were getting less. And before he could prevent that, it had happened. So Bhagavan ate the whole thing silently, but he was not very happy with what has happened. And normally when the kitchen workers, the women workers in the kitchen, they would take leave in the night time. They could not stay in the ashram. They would go to Bhagavan in the evening before departing for their house in the town. So Chantamal was also there in the crowd. Bhagavan called her over to his side. What did you do today? He asked her. So Shantamal said, Bhagavan, did I do anything wrong? Yes, you did. You gave me more potato curry than the others. You gave me more curry than the others. And I felt so ashamed of myself. This is what Bhagavan said. I felt so ashamed to take more. And then he told her, I believe, only when you love my people more, you really love me. Only when you love my people more, you really love me. So that's the. So he used to really get upset if he was given an extra treatment or a special treatment in the kitchen. And about the Sarva Bhuta Samatvam, there is an extraordinary incident that is mentioned. A visitor came to the ashram and not finding Bhagavan in the meditation hall, he asked people, They said that Bhagavan left this place some time back, but we do not know where he has gone. It is an unusual hour for him to leave. So what he did was he wanted to check out the ashram. He went to all the places, and when he was going near the kitchen veranda, he heard some voice. Looked like it seemed like Bhagavan's voice. And there was a small kitchen garden, and then there was some brinjal, bushes and so on. Behind that, he peeped behind that, and then he saw an extraordinary sight. Bhagavan was sitting under, he was sitting on his haunches, with his legs pulled up to his chest, sitting on his haunches. In front of him, there was a goat and a monkey. And on his shoulder, there was a squirrel. And Bhagavan had, in a newspaper, he made it to a cup. He had groundnuts. And this visitor saw was, Bhagavan would give one nut to the goat, and one nut to the monkey, and one to the squirrel, and he will eat a peanut. He will put a peanut in his mouth and eat it. And this was going in rotation. And the voice that he heard was Bhagavan scolding the monkey, which snatched out of turn a groundnut from Bhagavan's hands. So Bhagavan was mildly scolding it. Asate, Purumayaru. You naughty one, please wait for your turn. And he saw this. And he was so thrilled about that sight, 4 different species perfectly at ease with each other. And, sharing this as though there were no differences at all. In fact, there were no differences. None of them felt the difference. Neither the goat felt that it was different, nor the monkey, nor the squirrel. All of them were one. And that sight, he felt this is a transcendent experience. He had a flash of that transcendence. This visitor, he says, it was so thrilling to see this. And Bhagavan eventually got up and he says, Pongada, all of you go, he said. And then he started walking back to his room. So this person has recorded it, and he says, whenever I think of that, then I only have that Virat Purusha's, Swarupam appearing before me, one who has everything within himself. That kind of a feeling I had. So Bhagavan lift that samadrishti samadrishtistu kartavya, Bhagavan's case. And so many more such stories, not just this, just one. So many more such stories. So, samadrishtistu kartavya, yat atmani tatha pare, whatever you wish for others, you wish for yourself, and you see others as yourself, and yourself in others. And that is the yogi, that is the great yogi. And this is what has to be cultivated. So, all these verses, Ishvara is saying, what has to be given up and what has to be cultivated. What is not very important. All this puja, they are not important. What is important is to develop this ahimsa, this samadrishti, samabhavam, samatva bhavam. And then, have equanimity when somebody is praising you or somebody is scolding you, insulting you. Don't worry, don't react to any of these things. And these are the things to be cultivated, he says. So this is the 76th verse. Go to the 77th verse. Again, what should not be done is being mentioned by Ishvara here. Vivadam loka goshtischa kalahamscha vivarjayet sastra koshti nakurvita kubhashita subhashitan uruvuha veen vadamudan. Uruvuha means abandon. Veen vadam, indulging in unnecessary arguments. Ulaka goshti uruvuha. Don't get involved in all these crowds and worldly associations. They're not going to help you. Ulaka goshti uruvuha. Paln kalahamum. Don't create any misunderstanding between one and the other. This kalaham, all these things will start happening once you have, great associations, you move with the worldly crowds, and naturally you get sucked into their affairs, and all kinds of things happen. For a jnana abhyasi, this is to be totally avoided. Do not join religious bodies. He says, Shastra Goshti na kurvita. There are big associations where people will keep on discussing about, all the Shastras, and, this religion says this, that religion says this is the correct practice that is to be given up. All these vivadas will be going on, all these arguments will be going on. Completely abandon all of them, because the Shastras are not going to help you. Many people think that intellectual understanding of the Shastras are going to be very useful in one's spiritual journey. Not at all. The Shastra, the knowledge of the Shastras, on the other hand, will really come as an obstacle for your growth. So avoid all these things, he says. In fact, we saw in an earlier satsang about Adi Shankara saying that all these things are only for one's own bhukti and not for mukti. Vaidushyam vidusham tatvat bhuktaye natu muktaye, he says in Viveka Chodamani. In Ramana Paravidyopanishad, there is again by Lakshmana Sharma, he makes an observation regarding all this involvement in the Shastras and trying to see that intellectual understanding, get the intellectual understanding and stop with that, not proceed further. So he says, Vagyantra tulyoyam udiryate. Vagyantra tulyaha. Vagyantram is an interesting Sanskrit word he has coined to mention about a gramophone record. Gramophone, he calls it as Vakyantram. Vagyantra tulyoyam udiryate cha buddhvapi shastrartam asanta chetaha. People understand all the Shastras, but they are still not peaceful. Their mind has not subsided in the peace of the self. They are all the time arguing about one and the other and trying to get more and more deeply into all the Siddhantam, the differences between one and the other. And he says, apanditapi, at least an illiterate person who does not know anything about the Shastram, even he is better. He says, avaroya mukto madadi doshaihi paribhuta bhavaha. He says, the person who is an intellectual, who has understood all the Shastras, he is worse off compared to a person who has not learnt anything at all. Apanditaha, somebody who has not learnt anything, he is better off, because at least he will not develop any pride. But the person who is an intellectual, he has developed pride. He does not know anything at all in the experiential sense. He only knows everything in the mind, and he is not bothered to really follow it up by getting the experience of Advaitam. Advaitam, the purpose of Advaitam is not understanding but experiencing. That people do not understand. All the time they spend their time in all these things. Here the warning is, don't get involved in all these things. It will not take you to the right path. Kubhashita subhashitana teechollodu yet nacholluhum iha. You don't have to praise somebody or insult somebody. Avoid both. You don't have to do any of these things. Don't get involved in anything worldly. In Muruganar, in Ramana Sannidhimurai, in fact, he mentions this in Tiruvambave, Ramana Tiruvambave. Margasirsha month has started from yesterday, the day before yesterday. So it's very, very appropriate. In Tiruvambave, Muruganar says in one place, Vigadangal Parati, Veenkalam Pokadu. Vigadangal, entertaining oneself with all kinds of scandals, all kinds of scurrilous things. In the media today, we find only these things, that is what is, going to increase one's readership. So they publish all kinds of things, and then we get involved in this. We start debating about this and that. All our time we are wasting. So here Muruganar says, Vikadangal. Vikadangal are those things that entertain you. They are all Vikatam. Vikadangal Parati, doing all this entertainment. Veen kalam pokadu. Don't waste your time. Akalangana emmai andan. So he protected us from all these things. Akalangana. Without our getting into all these things, he saw to it that we avoided all these things. He protected us. He says in this, Vigadangal Parati, Veen Kalam Pokadu, Akalangana emmai andan. And we have to worship his feet, and that is the real meaning of the snanam that one takes in the month of Margari, the what we call as the Mrigashirsha month. Every morning we take a bath and then we go to the temples and then we praise the Lord and all that thing. The real meaning of all these things is only staying in the self and then having a dip in the waters of the self, and that is the real meaning. So in the Tiruvambave, these two lines are really beautiful, where Muruganar also says the same thing. So the import of this verse is Sastra Goshtin na kurvita, don't get involved in anything, any of these things. Kubhashita, Subhashitan, not praising somebody and not, insulting somebody, talking scandalous things about somebody. Don't get involved in any of these things. They're not going to take you further. The next verse is the 78th verse. Irshyam Paishunya Dambhaucha Ragam Matsaryamevacha Kamakrodhau Bhayam Shokam Tyajet Sarvam Shanaihi. Shanaihi gradually. Ishvara knows that it's very difficult to give up all at once. It happens to only a very few. So he says, Shanaihi. Keep your focus on slowly giving up all these unwanted things. And then he gives a big list. And this list kind of a thing occurs in Bhagavad Gita and all other spiritual works also. Irshya means jealousy. Paishunya means slander. Dambham is pomp. Display of one's wealth, that is dambam. Ragam is passion. Similarly, kama, krodha, lust, anger, bhayam, fear, shokam, grief. All these negative feelings have to be given up. He says, Tyajet sarvam shanaihi. In an earlier satsang we saw Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes a chain starting from desires, how a chain reaction occurs and then a person ruins himself. Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammohaha sammohat smriti vibhramaha smriti bhramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. Says a desire, the desires that are the inner objects. Once one has desire for something, it leads to attachment of the thing. Desire for something will lead to an attachment. That attachment leads to kamam, and that kamam leads to anger. Anger because, when what you desire is not, you are not able to obtain, you become very angry with that obstacle to your kamam. So anger develops, and anger reaches a peak. One loses one's balance, and one loses one's balance. He forgets everything good that he has done so far. Yes, whatever he has built up as his reputation, everything is forgotten. He is prepared to throw everything to the winds. And then his intellect takes leave at that time. Buddhinasaha. And buddhinashat pranashyati. He is ruined when such a thing happens. So this is the negative cycle. Starting from desire, one becomes a total wreck at the end of it. On the other hand, in the same Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna mentions about the positive thing. He says, on the other hand, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodhaha, those who are able to give up this ragam, attachment, and give up their fears and their anger. If they are able to do this, their mind will be full of me, he says, manmaya, mam upashritaha. They will be dependent totally upon me, and their mind is full of me. Bahavo jnana tapasa aputa madbhavam agataha. Their mind becomes totally purified. Jnana tapasa, this is jnana tapas. Giving up all these things is jnana tapas. This is the great austerity for the sake of knowledge. The mind gets purified when they give up these things. Madbhavam agataha, they become me, he says. Again, he says, Kamayesha Krodayesha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyeham Iha Vairinam. The greatest enemy for somebody who is an aspirant is Kama, this attachment, the Ragam, Krodham, the anger. These two things, Rajoguna Samudbhavaha, they are the result of one's Rajogunam. Mahashano, they eat up all good qualities, he says. Mahashana is a great eater. They eat up all the good qualities. Mahapapma, they are the wickedest things. Kamam and Krodham. So give them up. So when we saw the negative cycle, the positive cycle is moving away from this Ragam, Bhayam, Krodham, and mind becoming totally purified. Jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agataha. They have come, and then they have become me. They have become one with me. This is what he says. So if all the bad things as a big list has been mentioned by Ishvara here. Irshayum kolum. Kolum is slander. Kol solvadu, we say. Kol is slandering. Irsha, dambam. Dambam is display of wealth and, pomp and other things, arrogance. Ragamum, attachment. Sarum, macharyamum tan. Madam, atsaryam is, hatred. All these things are the most evil things. Teridum, ashayum, kopamum, achamum, shogamum. Ni sarvamum mella neek. Shanaihi. Bhagavan translates it accurately, and he says, mella neek. Slowly give them up. Constantly thinking about giving them up will lead you finally to give them up. Once you know that you are now getting into the zone of all these bad things, once you develop that kind of a capability in the mind, the beginning even that will not happen. But once your meditation, your Atma Vicharam progresses, when the mind gets disturbed and then it gets into the negative zone, you are immediately aware of that. And when you are immediately aware of that, you should be able to withdraw yourself from that. It does not happen immediately, but over a period of time, these things happen, and these are the good things to develop and then have for a jnana abhyasi, says Bhagavan. So with this, we will conclude today. I think maybe there'll be 2 more sessions. We will have them and then complete the Devi Kalottaram. Thank you.